There was a village, small, forgotten. There was nothing unusual there. An old roadside chapel, crooked cottages, a cemetery with faded crosses, and Wolf Hill. A hill marked in a different color, even on the maps. No trees grew there. The grass was always yellow, and birds flew around it in a wide arc. They said there used to be an oak forest there, but something burned it from the inside. In Trzaskowo, the people were simple and withdrawn. No one talked about Wolf Hill, but the children knew, because each of them had heard the legend about the white woman. They said that once every generation, always during the first full moon after the summer solstice, someone disappears. Always a young person, always at night, always last seen near Wolf Hill, and always afterward she was seen. The white woman, not a ghost, not a spirit, something more. Something that moved like a shadow but left tracks. And she sang, but only for the one who was to be taken. "It's just a fairy tale," said Ben, a 17-year-old who had recently moved there with his parents. Folk nonsense. He was sitting with 3 new friends, Emily, Kevin, and Victor, by a campfire near an old barn. "No one dares go up there at night," said Emily quietly. Ben smirked mockingly. "So what? Wanna bet?" "On what?" asked Kevin. "That I'll go up to Wolf Hill tonight, alone." Victor turned pale. "Don't do it." Ben laughed, but the night did not laugh with him. The night was waiting, because that night the moon was full, and the white woman was already coming. It was past midnight. The full moon hung over Wolf Hill, casting a pale light over its yellow, barren surface. Ben walked alone, with a backpack, a flashlight, and a phone. "Just a hill like any other," he muttered to himself. "People are just imagining things." But the moment he set his first foot on the slope, the world went silent. Literally. No wind, no crickets, nothing. Only a silence so deep that his own footsteps sounded like knocks on a coffin. He descended lower until finally he stood at the summit. Nothing unusual. Dry soil, scorched grass, here and there remnants of old roots. But something felt wrong. In the center of the hill was a hole, as if someone had ripped a chunk of the earth out, leaving a dark void. Ben stepped closer. A chill came from within, completely unnatural for a summer night. And then he heard it, singing. Software, feminine, like a lullaby sung to a child, but the words were inhuman, like a language no one was ever meant to hear. Ben stepped back, but the ground beneath him cracked open. He fell straight into darkness. He landed hard, but he was alive. Now he lay in what looked like an underground chapel. The walls were covered in symbols carved into stone that smelled of dampness and iron. At the center, a stone circle, and on it, a white figure. She stood with her back to him. A long dress reached down to the floor, hair like a curtain of milk, and when Ben tried to move, he realized he couldn't. His body refused to respond, and the white woman slowly turned around. Her face was blurred, as if seen through water. But one thing was clear, her eyes. They had no pupils. They were empty, like the bottom of a well. And in those eyes, Ben saw himself, standing on the summit of the hill. But it wasn't him. It was something else. Something that was already returning in his body. Ben couldn't move. He could feel his body, but it felt foreign, like he was only a passenger, no longer the one behind the wheel. The white woman stood motionless, her face still blurred, as if she only partially existed. But her voice filled the space around him. She didn't speak with words. He heard her directly in his mind, like a thought that couldn't be stopped. A body for a body, blood for memory. You will return, but not alone. Ben lost consciousness. When he woke up, he was lying in the grass. He was at the summit of Wolf Hill. The sun was beginning to rise. The night had passed, and everything looked normal. But nothing was normal. He stood up, walked down the hill, and returned to the village. His phone had no signal. His watch had stopped. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the villagers didn't recognize him. He stopped them, asked questions, tried to talk, but everyone looked at him with fear and walked away. Eventually, he found his way back to the old barn. Inside were Kevin, Victor, and Emily. They sat in silence, eyes wide open. They saw him, and all went quiet. Emily stood up slowly. "Ben," she whispered. "Yeah, what?" "It's me. I told you I'd go and come back." But Victor took a step back. "That's not you." Ben froze. "What do you mean it's not me?" Kevin was trembling. You have different eyes." Ben turned to the nearby window, and then he saw it. The reflection wasn't his. The face was similar, but the eyes were empty, just like hers. Ben stepped back from the window, his heart pounding. But that heart didn't beat like it used to. Too quiet, too slow, as if it was only pretending to be alive. Emily stared at him as if she were seeing something through a veil. "That's not possible," she whispered. "He came back." Kevin grabbed her arm. "That thing only looks like Ben." "It's not him." Ben started laughing, but the laugh was dry, strange, as if it didn't belong to human vocal cords. "You don't understand. Everything's fine. I came back." Victor reached for a kitchen knife lying on the table. "Stay behind me." Ben tilted his head and smiled, too wide. "What are you going to do, Victor? Stab me? You think that'll stop what's already begun?" "This is just the first. The hill is waking up." Before anyone could react, the lights in the barn went out. Everything was swallowed by darkness. And again, just like that night, silence. Not natural, not peaceful, but heavy, suffocating, dead. And in that silence, a whisper appeared. Not Ben's, not Emily's, not from any of them. It was a woman's voice. Software, like a mother singing to her child, but the words were like poison spilling through the mind. And then everything went black. When they opened their eyes again, Ben was gone, but in the middle of the floor, something was growing. A small white flower, delicate, like something from a fairy tale, but around it, The soil was black and thick, like it had been dug from a grave, and from the center of the flower, an eye was staring, a human eye, and they all heard a single sentence, "One has returned, now others will follow." The flower pulsed. Its petals lifted gently, as if it were breathing, and the eye at its center did not blink. It just stared at them, at the world, as if something behind the veil of reality was now watching everything. "We have to go, now." Victor no longer hid his fear. Emily was on the verge of tears. But what if it really was Ben? What if some part of him is still in there? Kevin didn't look at her. He was staring at the flower. That thing, it wasn't just her. It was a ritual. And he was only the beginning. They left the barn and headed toward Wolf Hill. There was no point in calling for help. They knew that. Things like this don't end with a phone call. They end where they began, at the summit. On the way, they passed villagers. Some looked completely normal, but others, their movements were too stiff, their faces too lifeless, and all of them stared as they passed. Not a word, no emotion, just watching. And then Victor understood. It's already started. It's not just Ben. That thing, it's spreading. When they reached the base of Wolf Hill, the moon was full again. But it shouldn't have been. Only 3 days had passed since the last one, and the sky looked just like it had that night. Dead, silent, unnaturally bright. At the top of the hill, someone was already waiting. A figure, dressed in white, hair reaching all the way to the ground. But this time, she faced them, and she was smiling. Too wide, too calmly, as if she had known them their whole lives. Emily, Kevin, and Victor stopped halfway up the slope of Wolf Hill. The white figure stood motionless, but despite the distance, they could feel something pulling them in. Not just curiosity, not just fear, something deeper, as if their hearts themselves wanted to move closer. "It's her," whispered Emily, "the white woman." Her voice trembled, but not only from fear. She felt something familiar, as if something from her own memory was calling out to her. Victor grabbed her hand. "Don't go near her." But Emily was already moving. Each step on the dry grass sounded like a nail hammered into a coffin. The white woman did not move. But when Emily got close enough, her voice spread across the hill, soft yet piercing. "I did not come. You called me. Wolf Hill does not forget. It does not forgive. You owe a debt. You took him long ago." Victor and Kevin cautiously stepped closer. "Who?" asked Kevin. "What are you talking about?" The white woman turned her head only slightly, and in that moment their minds were flooded with a vision, not a dream, not a hallucination, a memory. Wolf Hill. But over 100 years ago, a child, a little girl, tied up, terrified, being pulled into the earth by a circle of people dressed in white. Her scream, her eyes, and then silence, and the people performing the ritual. They laughed. They returned to the present with a gasp. Emily dropped to her knees. That was us? Our ancestors? The white woman looked straight at her. I am the seed they planted. I am the root of guilt. And now I harvest the crop. The ground beneath them began to crack open, and something was coming out again, but this time, not one, many. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, but not like during an earthquake. This was something organic, like something was hatching. From cracks in the soil, hands emerged, not dead, not alive. Something in between, black as coal, with skin as rough as bark, crawling up the slope of the hill like insects. Each hand had human fingers, but their movement was too calm, too aware. Kevin grabbed Emily and pulled her back sharply. Victor dove to the side, narrowly dodging one of the limbs trying to grab his ankle. From above, like from a throne, the white woman watched. Her face showed no emotion. Yet from her lips came a whisper that all of them heard inside their minds. You are the fruit of a cursed tree. Your roots are soaked in crime. Your bodies belong to the earth. One of the hands grabbed Victor's foot. He managed to tear free, but where it touched him, his skin began to bruise and throb. It's absorbing me, he screamed. Kevin snatched up a stick and smashed the hand with a blow. But it felt like breaking dry, dead wood. Too easy, too brittle. And where the hand fell, another one began to grow like a fungus, as if the earth was a living organism, constantly regenerating itself. Emily looked up to the summit of Wolf Hill. The white woman raised her hand. She pointed at her and spoke. You are the last. Your blood will close the circle. Emily stepped back. Why me? She shouted. I didn't do anything. The white woman answered without words. In Emily's eyes, a vision returned. Her grandmother, young with long hair, standing in a circle with others, and that same little girl begging for help. Her grandmother looked away. She didn't protest. She simply allowed the sacrifice. Emily screamed, trying to break free of the vision, but it was no longer a vision. It was a truth buried in her family's bloodline. And now, the earth wanted repayment. Emily staggered, leaning against Kevin. Tears streamed down her face, not from pain, but from hopeless realization. It was my family, my blood, she whispered. They were the ones who sacrificed her. Kevin looked at her with a mix of pity and fear. It's not your fault. You didn't betray her. But Emily already knew. That wasn't enough. Not here, not on this land, not in the face of that creature. The white woman raised her hands. The sky above Wolf Hill darkened suddenly, as if the sun had been extinguished. From the darkness, gray flakes began to fall like ash, but more organic. Each touch on their skin was cold as death. Victor groaned, clutching his bruised, blackening leg. I can't. Something is growing inside me. And then smoke poured from his mouth. Not steam, something black pouring out from deep within his body. His eyes began to melt as if made of wax. And then he stopped screaming. He fell silent, collapsed. And then he began to grow, literally. From his chest, a white flower emerged, the same as the one from the barn, and from within it, a human eye stared once more. Emily fell to her knees. If you want me, take me, but leave them. Silence. Then a whisper. A debt is not paid in part. All or nothing. Kevin looked at Emily. "There's another way. Fire. Like in that story about the root. Burn the place, kill the memory." Emily looked at him with a glimmer of hope. "Do you have anything?" Kevin reached into his backpack and pulled out a gas canister. "If we burn this place, maybe she disappears, but we might too." "I know," she replied, "but better to die by our own choice than live in her shadow." Emily stepped into the center of the circle. Kevin poured gasoline onto the soil. The white woman began to scream. But it was not a human scream. It was the wail of ancient earth, as if it knew the end was near. Emily looked at Kevin. She nodded. He struck a match and threw it. Wolf Hill went up in flames. The fire consumed the earth in a split second. Dry grass and rotting roots erupted into flames as if they had been waiting for it all along. The white woman howled, not like a human, like something that should never have had a voice. Her form began to disintegrate in the air, piece by piece, like ash carried backwards by the wind. But the worst part didn't scream. It watched, from within the fire, from the burned remains of the earth, dozens of eyes. Every flower, every dead root, every echo of past guilt. They stared, and they wept blood. Emily stood in the center, surrounded by fire. She did not burn. She did not scream. She was a part of it all. The fire danced in her eyes, and she knew this was her end, but also the end of what had been feeding for generations. She closed her eyes, and then the ground trembled one last time. And then silence. Kevin awoke a few meters away by a stream. He didn't know how he had gotten there, but he remembered the fire and her face, her smile, peaceful, as if she was finally free. Wolf Hill ceased to exist, literally. The next day, the villagers spoke of a strange fire that left not even ash behind. The land was flat, as if something had ripped the hill out by its roots. No bodies were ever found, not Ben, not Victor, not Emily. Only a charred flower, red, closed, as if it was never meant to bloom again. Months passed. Kevin left. He never told anyone what happened, but sometimes, as he drifted off to sleep, he heard a whisper. Soft where? Feminine. Not everything dies. Not everything disappears. Some things wait. And in his dreams, Wolf Hill returned, but it was no longer alone.